Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. I mean, how much can a person take before they snap? Before the scales of justice, or what you think is justice, tip so heavily that you can't even recognize yourself anymore. I'm talking about a debt paid in blood, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it changed everything. I had to do what I did. I truly believe that, but tell me, would you have done the same thing if you were in my shoes? Would you have let someone destroy your life and get away with it? Or would you have made sure that every single drop of pain they inflicted was repaid, in full, even if the cost was your own soul? It all started so innocently, as these things often do. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and for the most part, it was a good thing. We looked out for each other, celebrated together, mourned together. My family wasn't rich, but we weren't poor either. My dad owned a small construction company, just enough to keep us comfortable, and my mom was a teacher at the local elementary school. We lived in a cozy house with a big backyard, and I spent most of my childhood climbing trees and dreaming of escaping the small town life. I always had big plans, you see. I wanted to go to a prestigious university, become an architect, and build towering structures that touched the sky. My parents, bless their hearts, supported every crazy dream I had. They saved every penny they could, worked tirelessly, and made countless sacrifices to ensure I had the best opportunities. I was their only child, their pride and joy, and I felt that weight, that immense pressure to make them proud, to make all their sacrifices worthwhile. Then came David. David was the son of Mr. Henderson, the wealthiest man in town. Mr. Henderson owned the biggest lumber mill, several acres of land, and practically half the businesses downtown. David, on the other hand, was everything his father wasn't: lazy, arrogant, and with a sense of entitlement that oozed from every pore. He was my age, and we went to the same school, but we moved in completely different circles. I was the studious, quiet kid, always buried in books, while David was the loud, popular one, surrounded by a posse of hangers-on who laughed at his terrible jokes and indulged his every whim. He was a bully, plain and simple, and he made my life, and the lives of many others, a living hell throughout high school. He'd trip me in the hallways, deface my locker, spread rumors, and generally just make it clear that I was beneath him. I tried to ignore him, to rise above it, but it chipped away at me, slowly but surely. I never told my parents the full extent of his cruelty. I didn't want to worry them, and honestly, I was embarrassed. I thought if I just kept my head down, it would eventually stop. It never did. Things came to a head in our senior year. I had finally received my acceptance letter to the architecture program at my dream university, a full scholarship no less, thanks to my relentless hard work and perfect grades. My parents were ecstatic, tears in their eyes, hugging me like I had won the lottery. It was the culmination of everything we had worked for, the light at the end of a very long, arduous tunnel. The future was bright, limitless. I was finally going to escape this town, escape David, and build the life I always dreamed of. But David, it seemed, wasn't done with me yet. He couldn't stand the idea of me, the quiet, nerdy kid, succeeding where he, the golden boy, was merely coasting by on his father's money. He'd been accepted to some mediocre state school, a fact he grumbled about constantly. One night, a few weeks before graduation, there was a big party at a classmate's house. I rarely went to these things, preferring to stay home and study, but my friends convinced me to go, to celebrate my scholarship. It was supposed to be a night of fun, a final hurrah before we all went our separate ways. I remember the music was blaring, people were laughing, and for a brief moment I actually felt like I belonged. Then I saw David across the room, his eyes fixed on me with that familiar hateful glare. He was surrounded by his usual crowd, drinks in their hands, their faces flushed. I tried to avoid eye contact, but it was too late. He started walking towards me, slowly, deliberately, like a predator stalking its prey. My heart began to pound in my chest. I wanted to run, to disappear, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. He cornered me near the snack table, his breath reeking of alcohol. He started taunting me, mocking my scholarship, calling me a try, hard, and a teacher's pet. His friends snickered behind him. I tried to walk away, to ignore him, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. He pulled me closer, his face inches from mine. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" he sneered. "Think you're going to build your fancy buildings and leave us all behind?" I didn't say anything, just stared at him, my mind racing, trying to figure out how to get out of this situation. He started rambling, getting angrier and angrier, fueled by alcohol and pure spite. Then he said something that still echoes in my mind, even now, years later. "You know what? I'm going to make sure you never leave this town. You're going to stay right here, just like everyone else." I didn't understand what he meant at the time. I just shrugged off his hand and pushed past him, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I left the party immediately, the celebratory mood shattered. I tried to forget about it, to brush it off as another one of David's drunken rants, but a sense of unease settled over me. A few days later, disaster struck. My dad's construction company, the one he had built from the ground up, the one that had supported our family for decades, was suddenly in deep trouble. A major project, one that was supposed to be a huge breakthrough for them, fell through at the last minute. All the contracts were abruptly canceled, suppliers withdrew, and subcontractors demanded their payments. My dad was devastated, heartbroken. He looked years older overnight. He tried everything he could to salvage it, to find new work, but it was like every door was suddenly slammed shut in his face. It wasn't just the loss of the project. It was as if someone had deliberately sabotaged his entire business. He eventually had to declare bankruptcy, losing everything. Our house, our savings, my parents' retirement fund, all of it gone. My scholarship, tied to a local community foundation that sponsored talented students from the area, was revoked. The foundation, which was heavily funded by Mr. Henderson, cited unforeseen financial difficulties as the reason. It was all a lie, of course. I knew deep down that David was behind it. He had followed through on his threat. He had used his father's influence, his family's money, to systematically dismantle my future, to destroy everything my parents had worked so hard for. He had paid off my dad's clients, manipulated the foundation, and made sure that my dreams and my family's security crumbled to dust. The years that followed were a blur of hardship and despair. My parents, once vibrant and full of life, were reduced to shadows of their former selves. My dad took odd jobs, his spirit broken, while my mom continued to teach, though the light in her eyes had dimmed considerably. We moved into a tiny, run-down apartment, and I started working immediately after high school, taking any job I could find to help support them. Construction, retail, waiting tables, I did it all. My dreams of architecture, of a grand future, faded into the background, replaced by the crushing reality of survival. And through it all, David thrived. He went off to his mediocre college, came back to take over his father's empire, and lived a life of opulence and ease. I'd see him sometimes, driving past in his expensive car, a smirk on his face, as if mocking my downfall. The injustice of it all gnawed at me, a constant, burning ache in my chest. He had taken everything from us, everything we had ever worked for, and he faced no consequences. He just continued to live his privileged life, while we struggled day in and day out, buried under the weight of his cruelty. The debt he owed us, the debt for our destroyed future, our broken spirits, was enormous, and I swore to myself, in the darkest corners of my mind, that one day he would pay. Every single penny, every single tear, every single shattered dream would be accounted for. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. For years I had quietly simmered, watching David flaunt his wealth, his happiness, while my family suffered. I had tried to forget, to move on, to accept our fate, but the injustice was a poison that seeped into every aspect of my life. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let it go, forgiven him, and tried to build a new life from the ashes? Or would you have sought retribution, believing that some debts demand to be paid, no matter the cost? I chose the latter. I decided that David would pay. Not with money, because no amount of money could truly repay what he had taken, but with something far more precious: his reputation, his standing, his carefully constructed facade of respectability. I spent years observing him, learning his routines, his weaknesses, his secrets. He was a creature of habit, and like most arrogant people, he was sloppy. He had a mistress, a young woman who worked at his father's mill, and he was funneling money from the company accounts to keep her quiet and comfortable. He was also involved in some shady land deals, using his father's influence to buy up properties at ridiculously low prices, then flipping them for massive profits, often displacing small, struggling families in the process. He thought he was untouchable, that his family name and his wealth shielded him from any repercussions. He was wrong. I meticulously gathered evidence, photographs, financial documents, recordings of conversations. It took years, working tirelessly in secret, sacrificing my own meager free time, but I was relentless. The anger, the pain, the memory of my parents' broken faces, it all fueled me. I learned everything there was to know about his illicit dealings, his betrayals, his hypocrisy. I built a case against him, piece by agonizing piece, a testament to his greed and his cruelty. The day I finally had everything, every single damning piece of evidence, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and cold dread. It was time. I didn't go to the police, not at first. I knew Mr. Henderson would just sweep it all under the rug, paying off anyone who dared to expose his son. I went to the local newspaper, a small, independent publication that had a reputation for fearlessly reporting on local corruption. I presented them with my dossier, a thick file filled with irrefutable proof of David's crimes. The editor, a grizzled old journalist named Frank, listened intently, his eyes widening as he sifted through the documents. He was hesitant at first, wary of taking on such a powerful family, but the evidence was overwhelming. It wasn't just a story, it was a bombshell. The article hit the stands 2 weeks later. It wasn't just on the front page. It was the entire front section, detailing David Henderson's web of corruption, his mistress, his land scams, and the systematic destruction of my father's company. The town erupted. People were shocked, outraged. The story quickly spread beyond our small town, picked up by regional news outlets, then statewide. The Hendersons, once untouchable, were suddenly under intense scrutiny. Mr. Henderson tried to control the damage, to deny everything, but the evidence was too strong, too thoroughly documented. The police launched a full investigation. David was arrested, charged with embezzlement, fraud, and a host of other financial crimes. The mistress came forward, terrified but emboldened by the public outcry, and testified against him. The families he had displaced shared their stories of hardship. The dam had broken. The trial was a media circus. I sat in the courtroom every day, watching David, once so arrogant and self-assured, crumble under the weight of his own lies. His father, red, faced and furious, sat beside him, his power and influence rendered useless against the truth. David was convicted on all counts. He received a lengthy prison sentence, and his family's empire, built on deceit and exploitation, began to unravel. The lumber mill was sold off, the land deals were reversed, and the Henderson name, once synonymous with power and wealth, became a byword for corruption. It wasn't a clean victory. My family never fully recovered financially, and the years of struggle had taken their toll. But there was a sense of justice, a feeling that the universe had, finally, balanced the scales. I saw David's future, once so bright and unchallenged, extinguished, just as he had extinguished mine. And in that, I found a strange, dark satisfaction. It didn't bring back my dreams or erase the pain, but it validated the years of quiet suffering, the years of believing that the world was inherently unfair. Looking back now, I still grapple with the choices I made. Was it revenge? Absolutely. Was it justified? In my heart, I believe it was. He took everything, and I took it back, along with his freedom and his reputation. The debt was paid in full, but the cost to my own soul was heavy. I carry the scars of that battle, the memory of the rage, and the cold determination that drove me. But I also carry the knowledge that I stood up for what was right, that I refused to let evil triumph. This story isn't about celebrating vengeance. It's about the deep, agonizing question of what you do when someone shatters your world. What do you owe them, and what do you owe yourself? If you were on my side, if you understand why I did what I did, please like this video. Subscribe for more stories like this, where ordinary people face extraordinary challenges. And most importantly, share your final thoughts on this whole messy situation in the comments section below. I want to know, truly, what you would have done. I'll see you all in the next story.